Welcome to the Arc'teryx Toronto Campground. Camping in wet clothes is no fun for anyone. We always recommend having some sort of emergency shell, like the Beta LT.
Branded commercial content is all the rage in shifting today's video market. Highlighting a brand story or product is the fundamentals of today's cinematographer. Any successful brand commercial feels elevated, but there is a very specific look and feel. There are so many different ways to execute this, but where do you even start? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can do that by going over a series of commercials that we shot for Arc'teryx. I'm going to show you some lighting diagrams and dive into exactly how we pulled this off. We were challenged in creating a campsite in a store and making it feel almost like a commercial. The main talent in these series of videos is highlighting a new line of products as well as guidelines when camping. This was an interesting one because of the nature of the creative. Highlighting a product but also making a scene feel real in an unreal world. Let's dive into examples where we're going to be looking at the camera settings, lensing, as well as light temperatures that we use to pull this off. The first shot that we're going to be looking at is the introduction to the series where he's introducing the store as well exactly what he's going to be talking about. This is the Arc'teryx campsite, and it's very obviously that we're in a Arc'teryx store and highlighting some products as well as bringing some natural aspects of what a campsite looks like. So just to give you some camera specs, we shot this on the Sony FX9, and there's no necessarily reason for that. This is the camera that we're just using at this time period and really like the usability of it. And then we are shooting at a white balance of 5600 Kelvin. This is supposed to feel like daylight. This is supposed to be very naturalistic, and we push the colors and the rest of the colors in post. We are shooting on a 35mm prime. This is a Sigma, so this stops down to 1.4, but I believe we're shooting at an aperture of 2.8. So this would be F instead of T because these were photo lenses. A very standard setup. We're shooting on Sony lenses as well as a Sony camera, and to give us that actual push in and then the move into the scene, we were using the Rhino Arc II, so a very easy motion control slider that we could get consistently push ins and push outs. So let's first talk about lighting. So if we were to draw the room, this is what we're working with. And then in that room, there's luckily an overhead system of just all the strip lighting and like little accents lights that they use to light these products that are going on here. So that is actually the first thing that I started off with, because when we were looking at creative and what we're actually highlighting, we were talking about storms, and basically we wanted to do some realistic lighting changes to imitate like storms going on, or also just having a different feeling so it didn't feel as bland. We're basically only shooting in one direction, which is into the corner of the room, and we want to differentiate different shots by basically just doing lighting effects. This is just a technique that you use, especially in these like kind of quirky commercials where you're supposed to make everything feel a little different. So I know this is kind of overkill, but we actually had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Astera Titan tubes up overhead, and this is just basically highlighting everything and giving us a very nice top-down source that we can use to also do our lighting effects, as well as turning up certain lights to give a nice backlight and edge light, as well as some highlight to the products. So this is basically raising the ambience of the entire room, and you can see that we have some of that going on with here, the highlights that are going on here in the back. And then also we have another Astera Titan tube in the back behind him there, and that's just laying on the floor, and that's just shooting up, and it's adding some interest in the back of the frame. So those are the tubes that we have in play for this scene. And in this, we had actually a light change. So basically we're dollying in, and then it goes from a blue to like just have something of difference. And then it goes to this nice orange that we see here of him introducing the space and also introducing who he is in the character. So we went from like just a blue color, and then I went to 2700 to imitate kind of sunlight. As our main key light, we actually had a Forza 500 going through a scrim gym. So this is a 6x4 scrim, and then we had the Forza 500 just shining through that, and then inside the actual Forza, I believe we had a Fresnel on it so we could flood it across the entire scrim. We actually had a gel in that, and that was a believe quarter CTO just to add some warmth into it. We wanted to highlight this as the sun was kind of setting. So that has a quarter CTO, and this is a Forza 500. When we used to shoot things all the time, this is what we used to do just to warm up the lights, because we didn't have an actual bicolor light. So this is a Forza 500 is a 5600 daylight balance light. And then adding that quarter CTO kind of warms it up a bit and brings it down to like almost a 4,000 Kelvin. I'm not exactly sure. You can look up that value, but it's just a simple gel that you can get on Amazon, and that's what we use for this. So that is shining through that. And on the scrim, I believe it has one full stop and plus a half stop. So we're rocking 1.5 stops here, and that's what we always used to do. And then this is providing all that natural soft light that you see on him, and then highlighting the products over here. And then we just have a natural shadow side because he's acting as a neg to highlight the product. And then we get this nice wrapped light that is very high key, that is very commercial, as well as even from here, you can see a nice catch light because we're using such a large source that's so far away. And then in here, we have one of those, I believe, Nanlite Dito lights, or like they're the small like versions of the MC. So that's a Nanlite little panel. And that is just leaned up against something and going through a fire effect. So this little things like this elevate the piece, especially just adding little lights. And speaking of little lights, we have one more, which is the Forza 60B, and that is aimed right here. And this is set to 2700 Kelvin, so a very warm color. And this is splashing all that light that you see here, kind of imitate like the sunlight that you can go on here. So you can see that different harshness of light, as well as this being a bicolor light. So we can set it to that warmth because we wanted that warm kind of glow of what is provided by sunlight or even sunset, especially when you're camping. That's what you're going for. And then we had our camera, which was right here, pushing on that dolly track, shooting into the corner of the room to give us the most depth. But we knew something was missing. We wanted to make this like a grand kind of Jurassic Park entrance. That's what Justin kept saying on set. And what we did is we went outside and found a little tree and then just rigged up this little branch that you see here. And that is just one little sad little branch with a bunch of leaves just hanging down. And this is giving us a foreground like we're coming out of a bush to even sell this branded content even further. I know this is absolutely ridiculous and this is unrealistic, but this is what branded content is, and this is what companies are looking for, those little creative touches that kind of set you above from the rest. And then one additional thing that I saw that we did is this was providing us too much of a hot spot because our source was a little too big and it was like a little too hot here. I remember that actually on set. So we just had a small little flag kind of cutting some of the light that was going here, and that was just getting rid of that hot spot so we can highlight the product. So we're lighting the room, we're lighting him, and then we're also being very cognizant and aware of what the product looks like, because the client was like very like, hey, we just have to make sure the product is highlighted in its best light as well. And speaking of product, this is the next shot that we're going into, and this is just, I want to talk about it, of having a wide and necessarily a medium. So this is again on the Sigma 35, same camera settings of last time that we were using. And again, it was just highlighting and putting the product on actually a pedestal, which you can see the difference from here, just to really drive home of what exactly we're talking about, especially with the bag and what it can fit. And then he goes through a series of things that he's pouring glass, he's packing up some things. And then you can see here that the light that we're working with from the back is right here. So that is just shining up the tent and giving us another layer of interest. That's what I'm always looking for when these branded content or commercials. It's just like you're trying to build a very unrealistic world, and it just highlights what the store also looks like. Kind of blue fluorescent light that is giving us a lot of interest on the floor here. And I'm like, we're kind of missing something in this corner. So that's what we did. We added just this tube at a very warm color, 2700 Kelvin, just to accent that everything that's going on and matching our lights. The last shot that I want to look at was another interesting one because we started doing a lot more lighting effects, because he's talking about adverse weather conditions and feeling very unsafe. And basically this product makes you feel safe. This is the tent as well as the jacket that he's wearing. So the previous shot before this, he is standing and talking to the camera, and then the lights turn to blue to simulate a storm's coming in. And then we just added thunder in post to add to that. And then automatically he's in his jacket and then he's in the tent to feel safe. And then he goes on highlighting some of these products as well. So again, we're just shooting this on the Sony FX9. And then here you using a different lens. I forget the model of the lens, but it was a very cheap lens with all the distortion that you can see here. I remember the focal length was a 14 mil and it had an aperture of 2.8. So that's the lens that we're using for this. And it really gave the expansiveness and effect of what we're trying to sell, of being inside the tent. We wanted to use a very wide lens. If we just use the 24 to 70, it'd feel very claustrophobic. You want to use a very almost fisheye like lens for this stuff too. and something that's very wide and doesn't give you a lot of distortion. And then we're shooting at 5600 Kelvin, but what was really interesting here is what we had to simulate that a storm was going on. So if we kind of draw this tent, the opening is right there, and then camera is like almost on the floor pointing up at our main talent who's sitting here. We had to get really kind of scrappy with this, and this is what usually any filmmaking is, especially when it comes to branded commercials like this, as well as short films. I've seen this done on a lot of short films, and even in my narrative work, tubes are your greatest friend. And what we did is we just leaned up a tube against the edge, and I believe somebody was holding it and kind of had it tilted up. And this was basically lighting our entire tent. And this was set at like relatively like 25%, something super low. And this is set at 5600 Kelvin to kind of give us that naturalistic daylight and all the blue color contrast in the background. So I still have my Astera tubes rigged up overhead, and then we didn't have any of the tube that was in the background here. And then these tubes are all set to like a blue color. As you can see, that blue color contrast in the tent that we have kind of going on here. And that is mainly because of the blue lights that we have overhead. Just a simple tube and then blue for our ambient. But what was really the seller here was two things that we had going outside the tent. So again, we took that same little twig that we had before with all the leaves, and then we kind of put it in front of an aperture 120D here. And then we set this to a lightning effect. And as you can see here, this is where the lightning is happening, and it's giving us this nice color that we see here. And then also the flashes to make this realistic. But I said that we did two things to make this realistic, and then outside the tent, I don't know if it was Adrian or me, but somebody was actually shaking the tent and adding a bunch of vibration to this to simulate wind and everything like that. And then we added that in post. So this is something that we kind of thought on the fly on set. We wanted to do the lightning effect, but we're like, it just doesn't feel right. So we just had someone shake the tent. And this is something that you necessarily can't plan for. And this is something that you have to kind of step back and say, like, what could make this 10% better? What could make this even 20% better, 50% better, of if you feel like that was something missing. And this is something that we run into all the time during our shoots, is like, there's a little something. Let's take 5 minutes and really analyze. Give ourselves context of what we're shooting. We're shooting this guy in a storm and he feels safe. So let's kind of shake the tent a little bit. Let's add some lighting effects, make this feel real.